too big, no man will want her. Destined to be alone. What a shame with such a pretty face. Kansas, 1882. A time when a woman's value was measured by inches at her waist, not the strength in her heart. This is preposterous. I asked for a wife, not this. They said she'd never find love, that no man would ever want her, that her only value lay in what her hands could create, not who she was. But they didn't count on him, the black rancher who saw what no one else could see, and whose next words would silence an entire town. Stay with me until the very end. What happens next will challenge everything you thought you knew about love, worth, and who decides what makes someone valuable. If you're new to the Black Rancher, you've just stumbled upon the untold stories of America's forgotten heroes, stories of courage, dignity, and defiance that history tried to erase. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and notification bell right now. These aren't just stories. They're lost chapters of our shared history that deserve to be told. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end of this one to witness a moment so powerful it will leave you speechless. Now, welcome to the Black Rancher. Let's ride back to Willow Creek, Kansas, 1882. The stagecoach rattled into Willow Creek, dust swirling in its wake like golden ghosts. Isaiah Washington stood in the shadow of the general store, his tall figure commanding yet unobtrusive, a skill every successful black man in 1882 had mastered. At 43, Isaiah's broad shoulders carried the weight of the Raven Creek Ranch, 800 acres of prime Kansas grassland he'd built from nothing but freedom papers and 2 decades of back-breaking work. "Stage is early," muttered Walter Simmons beside him. "Must be Henderson's mail-order bride." Isaiah's interest peaked. Frank Henderson, the town's wealthiest landowner, had buried 3 wives already, each one seemingly less happy than the last. The stagecoach door swung open. A slender businessman emerged first, followed by an elderly couple. Then came a hesitant hand, reaching for the driver's assistance. The woman who descended made Walter Simmons gasp audibly. She was large. There was no delicate way to describe it. Her blue traveling dress strained at the seams, and her face, though undeniably pretty with soft brown eyes and full lips, was framed by plump cheeks, flushed pink with what might have been heat or anxiety. "Sweet mercy," Walter whispered, not kindly. "Henderson's gonna have a conniption fit." Isaiah said nothing, but his dark eyes tracked the woman as she was directed toward the hotel. There was dignity in her posture despite the whispers that followed her, the kind of dignity Isaiah recognized from looking in the mirror each morning. He didn't have to wait long. Frank Henderson's wagon came careening down the main street 20 minutes later, the man himself red-faced and clearly fuming before he'd even reached the hotel. "This should be interesting," Sheriff Miller commented, joining Isaiah on the porch. The door to the hotel burst open. Henderson emerged, practically dragging the woman behind him. "This is preposterous," his voice echoed across the street. "The advertisement specified a woman of proper breeding and appealing figure. You're enormous." A crowd began to gather, drawn by the spectacle. The woman flinched as if struck but kept her composure. "Sir, the agency was fully informed of my measurements," she said, her voice surprisingly melodic and steady. "I paid my own way here as agreed. I'm an excellent cook and housekeeper." "I didn't send for a cook," Henderson spat. "I sent for a wife. No one marries a fat girl, no matter how well she cooks." The crowd's titters burned Isaiah's ears. He'd heard similar mockery directed at himself. Different words, same intention. To diminish, to dehumanize. The woman stood straighter, though tears glistened in her eyes. "No one marries a fat girl, sir, but I can cook, I can clean. I can work for my keep until I earn enough for passage elsewhere," Henderson sneered. "And who would hire you? The saloon, maybe, to scare away drunks." More laughter rippled through the onlookers. The woman's shoulders slumped slightly, but her chin remained high. Isaiah felt something stir in his chest. Recognition, rage, respect. "I'll hire her." His deep voice cut through the jeers like a knife. The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning to the tall black rancher who had stepped forward. Henderson's mouth dropped open. "You? What would a—" He caught himself aware of the sheriff nearby. "A rancher want with her?" Isaiah approached slowly, deliberately, his gaze fixed not on Henderson, but on the woman, whose eyes had widened in surprise. "I need a cook at Raven Creek," he said simply. "Mrs. Abernathy's moving to her daughters in Topeka next month." He addressed the woman directly. "Pays fair. You'll have your own cabin. Safe work, respectable." Hope flickered across her face, quickly replaced by wariness. I don't know your name, sir." "Isaiah Washington," he tipped his hat, "owner of Raven Creek Ranch." Henderson scoffed. "You're actually considering working for a successful rancher?" the sheriff interrupted pointedly. The woman looked between Henderson and Isaiah, then squared her shoulders. "I'm Margaret Cooper, Mr. Washington, and I'm an excellent cook." Isaiah nodded. "Never doubted it, Miss Cooper." As they walked toward Isaiah's wagon, leaving Henderson sputtering in the street, Margaret whispered, "Thank you, but you don't have to do this. I know I'm not what most people want to see in their home." Isaiah helped her onto the wagon's seat with gentle strength. "Miss Cooper, I've learned that what most people see isn't worth much at all. It's what they don't see that matters." Margaret stood in the kitchen of Raven Creek Ranch, kneading bread dough with practiced hands. The early October sunshine streamed through the window, catching the blue ribbon pinned proudly to the wall, her triumph at the county fair 3 weeks earlier. That day had changed everything. Standing before the judges, enduring Mrs. Henderson's smug certainty of victory, hearing Reverend Freeman announce her name as winner, it had awakened something in Margaret that had been sleeping for years. Pride. The ranch hands had carried her on their shoulders back to Isaiah's wagon, celebrating as if they'd won themselves. Even Thomas, the oldest and most taciturn of the men, had whooped like a schoolboy. But it was Isaiah's reaction that lingered in her memory. No celebration, no loud praise, just that rare, slow smile and the quiet words, "Never doubted you for a moment, Miss Cooper." The kitchen door opened, pulling Margaret from her reverie. Isaiah entered, bringing the crisp autumn air with him. "Smells like heaven in here," he commented, stacking firewood neatly beside the stove. "Wait until dinner," Margaret replied. "Beef stew with dumplings." Isaiah nodded appreciatively, but remained by the door, watching her work with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "Is something wrong, Mr. Washington?" "Isaiah," he corrected gently. "After the fair, I think we're past formalities." Margaret smiled, dusting flour from her hands. "Isaiah, then. I'm riding to the north pasture today," he said suddenly. "Thought you might like to come along, see more of the ranch." Margaret's hands stilled. "Me? On a horse?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "The wagon. I'm not cruel enough to put a novice on horseback for a full day's ride." She hesitated. In the month she'd been at Raven Creek, she'd rarely ventured beyond the immediate surroundings of the main house. The idea was appealing, yet. "I couldn't possibly leave the men without meals." "They survived before you came," Isaiah pointed out. "One day fending for themselves won't kill them." Still, she hesitated. "I don't know. I've never ridden in a wagon for that long. Someone of my size." Isaiah's expression grew serious. "Margaret, I built that wagon myself. It carries 1,000 pounds of hay. It can certainly carry you comfortably." The matter-of-fact way he addressed her size, without mockery or discomfort, caught Margaret off guard. "I'd like that," she said finally. "Thank you." The journey across Raven Creek was a revelation. Rolling hills gave way to vast expanses of tall grass prairie that swayed like a golden sea in the autumn breeze. Isaiah pointed out landmarks and shared stories. The ridge where he'd fought off rustlers in '75, the meadow where his first foal was born, the stream that never ran dry, even in the worst drought. By midday, they reached the northern pasture, where a dozen magnificent horses grazed peacefully. Isaiah pulled the wagon to a halt beneath a large cottonwood tree. "This is my favorite spot on the ranch," he admitted, helping Margaret down. "Sometimes I come here just to think." They shared the lunch Margaret had packed, sitting on a blanket in comfortable silence. The air between them felt different here, away from the ranch house and its clearly defined roles of employer and employee. "May I ask you something?" Margaret finally ventured. "Why did you really hire me that day? Was it just pity?" Isaiah considered her question with the seriousness it deserved. Not pity. Recognition, maybe. Recognition of what? Of someone being judged for what they look like, not who they are. His eyes met hers directly. I know something about that. Margaret nodded slowly. Because you're black. Yes. He picked up a fallen leaf, examining its intricate patterns. But there was more, there was courage. Standing there holding your dignity while that fool tried to tear it away. That impressed me. It wasn't courage, she said softly. Just the habit of endurance. Isaiah's dark eyes held hers. Sometimes they're the same thing. Clouds gathered on the horizon as they packed up their lunch, the promise of rain hastening their departure. They had traveled halfway back to the ranch when the sky opened, drenching them within minutes. There's a line shack just ahead, Isaiah shouted over the downpour. We can wait it out there. The line shack was small but sturdy, a one-room cabin where ranch hands could shelter during bad weather. Isaiah quickly lit a fire in the small stove, while Margaret stood dripping in the center of the room, acutely aware of her wet dress clinging to every curve of her ample body. She turned away, crossing her arms over her chest, shame washing over her at the thought of Isaiah seeing her this way, every roll and bulge exposed by the wet fabric. You'll catch your death, Isaiah said practically. There are some dry shirts in that trunk. You should change. I'm fine, Margaret insisted, keeping her back to him. Margaret, his voice softened. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. She blinked back tears of frustration. I look ridiculous. Isaiah was silent for so long that she finally turned to face him. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. Earlier today, he said carefully, I told you I recognized something in you. Truth is, I've been watching you these past weeks, seen you stand taller, smile more freely. That blue ribbon didn't give you confidence. It just revealed what was already there. He took a step closer. I see you, Margaret Cooper. Your kindness, your courage, your dignity, and yes, your beauty. Don't, she whispered, but didn't move away. For most of my life, Isaiah continued, people have looked at me and seen only the color of my skin, judged me before they knew me. I swore I'd never do the same to another soul. Another step closer. When I look at you, I don't see what Henderson saw. I see a woman of strength and grace, a woman any man would be fortunate to call his own. Margaret's heart hammered in her chest. Isaiah, what are you saying? I'm saying that when Mrs. Abernathy told me she was leaving, I wasn't looking for a cook. His voice dropped lower. I was looking for a wife, but finding a wife isn't simple for a man like me. Understanding dawned, stealing Margaret's breath. So when you saw me, I saw someone who might understand loneliness, he finished. Someone who might not judge a black rancher who started with nothing. The rain drummed on the roof, creating a cocoon of sound around them. In this small cabin, miles from anyone else, something new and fragile took root between them, a possibility neither had dared to fully acknowledge until now. You're watching The Black Rancher, where we uncover the untold stories of courage and dignity from America's frontier. If you're just joining us, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell right now so you never miss these powerful tales of our shared history. The story you're watching isn't just history, it's a mirror reflecting truths we're still grappling with today. Who decides a person's worth? Is it the crowd or something deeper? Stay with us as we return to Kansas 1882, where Margaret Cooper is about to face her greatest challenge yet and make a choice that will either imprison her forever or set her truly free. The Thanksgiving preparations at Raven Creek Ranch were in full swing. Margaret had been cooking for days, pies cooling on windowsills, bread rising in pans, the massive turkey waiting to be roasted. This would be her first major holiday at the ranch, and Reverend Freeman and his wife were coming to dinner, along with two families from their church who had become friends with Isaiah over the years. Need anything from town? Isaiah asked, appearing in the kitchen doorway. I'm heading in for some supplies. Since their rain-soaked conversation in the line shack 3 weeks earlier, a new awareness had grown between them. Nothing had been spoken aloud, no decisions made, but Margaret caught Isaiah watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, and she found herself paying special attention to his favorite dishes, the set of his shoulders when he was tired. "Some cinnamon would be nice," she replied, "and perhaps ribbon for the table." An hour later, they were heading toward Willow Creek, the wagons swaying gently beneath them. The tension between them was palpable, unspoken feelings and unasked questions hanging in the crisp autumn air. "Margaret," Isaiah began finally, "what do you want from your life? Is cooking at Raven Creek enough for you? Or did you have other hopes when you came west?" The question hung between them, layered with meaning. Margaret considered her answer carefully. "When I left Ohio," she said slowly, "I hoped for a fresh start, a place where I might be valued for more than just my usefulness, where I might find companionship. And have you found that at Raven Creek?" His eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. "I've found acceptance," she acknowledged. "Respect. Those are precious gifts, but not companionship." His voice was very quiet. Margaret gathered her courage. "That depends on what you mean by companionship, Mr. Washington." He glanced at her, a hint of a smile touching his lips at her deliberate formality. "I think you know exactly what I mean, Miss Cooper." The outskirts of town came into view, breaking the intimate moment. Willow Creek was busier than usual with Thanksgiving preparations bringing people in from outlying farms and ranches. "I need to see the blacksmith," Isaiah said as he helped Margaret down from the wagon. "Will you be all right at the general store?" She nodded, though her stomach tightened at the thought of facing the town alone. "I'll be fine. Meet you back here in an hour." The general store was crowded with shoppers. Margaret moved through the aisles, gathering her items and trying to ignore the curious glances that followed her. Word of her blue ribbon victory had spread through the county, spawning speculation that ranged from admiring to salacious. "Miss Cooper, what a delightful surprise." Reverend Freeman approached, his kind face wreathed in a genuine smile. "Getting last-minute supplies for tomorrow's feast, I presume?" "Just a few things," Margaret confirmed, relaxing slightly. The Reverend's eyes twinkled. "My wife has been singing your praises since the county fair, says your blue ribbon was well-deserved." Margaret smiled, then tensed as she noticed Mrs. Henderson watching them from nearby, whispering to two elegantly dressed companions. The Reverend followed her gaze and frowned slightly. "Pay them no mind, Miss Cooper," he said quietly. "Small minds concern themselves with small matters." "It's difficult not to mind," Margaret admitted. "When their whispers follow you everywhere." Reverend Freeman nodded sympathetically. "I understand all too well. But let me share something with you. Those who judge most harshly are often the most afraid." "Afraid? Of what?" "Of difference. Of those who challenge their understanding of how the world should be." His voice was gentle but firm. "Isaiah has faced such judgment his entire life. It hasn't stopped him from building something remarkable." The comparison startled Margaret. She had never fully equated the judgment she faced for her size with what Isaiah endured for his race. "And in all that time," Reverend Freeman added, lowering his voice, "I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Heat rose to Margaret's cheeks. "Reverend, There are many kinds of hunger in this world," he continued with gentle wisdom. "The hunger for respect, for understanding, for companionship, for love. Those hungers can be even more powerful than the hunger for food." With that cryptic observation, he tipped his hat and moved on, leaving Margaret to ponder his words. Outside the store, Frank Henderson stood swaying slightly in front of the saloon, clearly in his cups despite the early hour. Margaret tried to hurry past, but he stepped into her path. "Well, if it isn't Washington's fat cook," he slurred. "Or is it more than cooking you do out there at that ranch?" Margaret froze, packages clutched to her chest like armor. "Nothing to say, fat girl?" Henderson took a step closer, malice glittering in his bloodshot eyes. "Guess your mouth's too full to talk." Across the street, Isaiah had emerged from the blacksmith shop. She caught his eye and saw him start forward, his expression darkening, but she gave a small, firm shake of her head. This was her battle. "Mr. Henderson," she said with calm dignity, "you're drunk. Go home before you embarrass yourself further." Henderson's face reddened with rage. "You don't tell me what to do, you fat—" "My size," Margaret interrupted, her voice clear enough to be heard by the growing number of onlookers, "does not diminish my worth as a person, nor does it give you the right to insult me." Henderson gaped, momentarily silenced by her unexpected defiance. "I cook for Raven Creek Ranch because I'm an excellent cook," she continued steadily. "I won the blue ribbon at the county fair because my pie was the best. Neither of these things has anything to do with my size." She stepped closer to him, no longer afraid. "But your cruelty, Mr. Henderson, that has everything to do with the smallness of your character." A few onlookers gasped, others nodded in approval. Henderson's face contorted with fury. "Are you uppity?" he began, raising his hand as if to strike her. In an instant, Isaiah was there, his hand catching Henderson's wrist in a grip that made the other man wince. "That's enough," Isaiah said quietly, his voice carrying the promise of consequences. For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other, history and hatred crackling between them. Then, Henderson jerked his arm free and spat on the ground. "Keep your whore," he snarled. "You deserve each other." As he stumbled away, Isaiah turned to Margaret, concern etched on his features. "Are you all right?" To his surprise, she was smiling, a genuine, radiant smile that transformed her face. "I'm better than all right. I'm free." "Free?" he echoed, confused. "For years," she explained, "I've let men like him define me. Let their judgment become my prison." She shook her head in wonder. "But he has no power over me. None of them do." Isaiah studied her face, seeing the new confidence shining there. "What changed?" "I did," she said simply. "Or rather, you helped me change. You saw me, really saw me, when no one else would look past this." She gestured to her body. "You gave me the chance to remember who I am beyond my size." The return journey to Raven Creek Ranch was charged with unspoken emotion. The late afternoon sun bathed the prairie in golden light, casting long shadows across the path ahead. Margaret's heart pounded with the realization that she stood at a crossroads. The confrontation with Henderson had stripped away her last defenses, the protective walls she'd built around her heart. For the first time in her adult life, she felt fully present in her own skin, unashamed, unapologetic. But what did that mean for her future, for her feelings toward the quiet, dignified man beside her? "You asked me earlier what I wanted," she said, breaking the silence. "If cooking at Raven Creek is enough for me." Isaiah's hands tightened on the reins, his expression unreadable. "And is it?" "No," she said simply. The wagon slowed almost imperceptibly. "I see." "No, you don't," Margaret continued, her voice gathering strength. "It's not enough because I want more, not from the ranch, from you." Isaiah pulled the wagon to a complete stop, turning to face her fully. His dark eyes searched her face. "Margaret, do you understand what you're saying? What it would mean, a white woman and a black man? The world isn't kind to such unions." "The world isn't kind to many things," she replied. "It wasn't kind to you building a ranch when black men weren't supposed to own land. It wasn't kind to me for taking up more space than a woman should. But we survived. More than that, we thrived." She reached out tentatively, placing her hand over his. "I'm not afraid of what the world thinks anymore. I only care what you think, what you feel." Isaiah looked down at their joined hands, her pale fingers against his darker skin. When he raised his eyes to hers, the intensity of emotion there took her breath away. "What I feel," he said slowly, "is that I've found something I never expected. Someone who understands struggle and perseverance. Someone who knows that worth isn't determined by how the world sees you, but by how you see yourself." He turned his hand to clasp hers properly. "I feel that God brought you to Willow Creek for a reason, not for Henderson, but for me, for us." Margaret's heart soared at his words, but practical concerns intruded. "People will talk. They'll say cruel things." "Let them," Isaiah said with quiet certainty. "Their words can't touch what we build together if we don't let them." As the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Isaiah reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn box. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band. "She gave it to me before she died, said to save it for a woman of substance, a woman who knows her own mind and heart." Margaret stared at the ring, tears welling in her eyes. "Margaret Cooper." Isaiah's deep voice was steady, though emotion made it rougher than usual. "No one marries a fat girl," they said, "but I'm not no one. I'm a man who sees your true worth, who values your strength, your dignity, your heart." He held the ring between them, a question and a promise. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not my cook, my partner, my equal, my love?" Tears spilled down Margaret's cheeks as she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Isaiah slipped the ring onto her finger, then gently cupped her face in his hands. "No one marries a fat girl," he whispered, "except a man who knows that true beauty, like true love, is never about appearance. It's about who we are at our core." As their lips met in their first kiss, bathed in the dying light of day, Margaret knew she had found what she had traveled west for, not just a husband, but a man who saw her completely and loved what he saw. The dining table in the main house stretched to its full length, covered with Margaret's finest cooking, the massive turkey golden brown and succulent, surrounded by dishes that showcased her considerable talents. Reverend Freeman sat at one end, his wife beside him, along with the Watson and Miller families, respected members of the Reverend's congregation who had formed friendships with Isaiah over the years. Isaiah stood at the head of the table, more formally dressed than usual in a crisp white shirt and black vest. Margaret stood beside him, wearing her best dress with Isaiah's mother's ring glinting on her finger. "Before we begin this meal," Isaiah said, his deep voice commanding attention, "Margaret and I have an announcement." He reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. "We are to be married. Reverend Freeman has agreed to perform the ceremony next Sunday." A moment of surprised silence was followed by genuine congratulations. Mrs. Freeman embraced Margaret warmly, while the men clapped Isaiah on the back. "I had my suspicions," Reverend Freeman said with a smile. "Never seen two people look at each other quite the way you two do." Only Mr. Miller seemed slightly uncomfortable, though he offered polite congratulations. His wife, however, was enthusiastic, asking about wedding plans and insisting on helping with preparations. The meal was a resounding success, the conversation flowing easily. As they enjoyed Margaret's pumpkin pie, the discussion turned to the upcoming nuptials. "Will you hold the ceremony at the ranch?" Mrs. Watson asked. Isaiah and Margaret exchanged glances. "We thought the church would be appropriate," Isaiah replied. A slight tension entered the room. Reverend Freeman cleared his throat. "There might be objections from some quarters." "You mean because I'm black and Margaret is white?" Isaiah said plainly. The Reverend nodded. "There's no law against it in Kansas, but that doesn't mean there won't be resistance, especially after that confrontation with Henderson in town." "All the more reason to do it properly in church," Margaret said firmly. "I won't hide our marriage as if it's something shameful." Isaiah squeezed her hand, pride evident in his eyes. "Nor will I." Sunday dawned clear and cold, the first real winter chill settling over the prairie. Margaret stood in her cabin wearing a new dress of deep blue that Isaiah had ordered specially from Topeka. Her hands trembled slightly as she pinned up her hair. A knock at the door revealed Mrs. Freeman, who had come early to help her prepare. "You look beautiful," the older woman said sincerely, "but you're nervous." "What if people object?" Margaret asked quietly. "What if they try to stop the ceremony?" Mrs. Freeman took her hands firmly. "Then you and Isaiah will face it together, as you'll face everything in your marriage, and you'll have friends beside you." The small church was already half full when they arrived, ranch hands from Raven Creek, friends of Isaiah's from town, the Watsons and Millers. But there were unfamiliar faces too, people who clearly hadn't come to celebrate. Frank Henderson sat in the back pew, flanked by several men Margaret recognized as local landowners. Their expressions were dark, disapproving. Reverend Freeman met them at the door, his face serious. "Henderson's been stirring trouble since he heard the news. Says he won't allow such an abomination in Willow Creek. Isaiah's jaw tightened. "It's not his decision to make." "No," the Reverend agreed. "It's not. But be prepared for interruption." Margaret's grip on Isaiah's arm tightened. "Perhaps we should have had a quiet ceremony at the ranch after all." Isaiah looked down at her, his eyes steady. "Are you ashamed to marry me, Margaret Cooper?" "Never," she replied instantly. "Then we'll do this properly, before God and witnesses." His voice was gentle but firm. "I won't start our life together by hiding." The ceremony began, Reverend Freeman's sonorous voice filling the small church with ancient promises of devotion and fidelity. Margaret and Isaiah stood before the altar, hands joined, eyes locked on each other. If any person present knows reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The moment the words left Reverend Freeman's lips, Frank Henderson surged to his feet. "This is an outrage," he shouted. "A white woman marrying a successful rancher," interrupted Thomas, Isaiah's oldest ranch hand, also rising. "A man who pays fair wages, who built something from nothing, who treats everyone with respect." "It ain't natural," Henderson persisted. No decent woman would what, Mr. Henderson?" Margaret's clear voice cut through the tension. "Choose a man of honor and integrity. A man who sees me for who I am, not just what I look like." She turned to face the congregation fully, her chin held high. "For years, men like you told me no one would marry a fat girl, that my only value was in what my hands could create, not in who I am." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Isaiah Washington saw differently. He saw courage when I stood before your cruelty. He saw dignity when you tried to strip it away. He saw beauty where you saw only size." She took a deep breath, looking directly at Henderson. "So yes, I choose to marry this man, not despite the color of his skin, but because of the content of his character." A murmur ran through the church. Henderson's face darkened with rage. "You'll regret this," he spat, "both of you." Isaiah stepped forward, his presence commanding. "Mr. Henderson," his deep voice resonated through the church. "I could speak of the hypocrisy of a man who has no problem using black hands to work his land, but objects to one holding his wife's hand." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the congregation. "I could remind everyone here that I fought for this country in a war that was supposed to mean something about freedom and equality." His voice softened as he turned back to Margaret. "But instead, I'll simply say this. I love this woman. Not despite her size, but as she is, wholly and completely. And anyone who can't see her worth exactly as she is, isn't worth our concern." Henderson stood, red-faced and sputtering, but to his obvious surprise, no one rose to join him. After a moment of tense silence, he stormed down the aisle and out of the church, the door slamming behind him. Reverend Freeman waited a moment, then addressed the congregation with quiet authority. "Anyone else who objects should leave now." The church was absolutely silent. "Very well," the Reverend smiled gently. "Let us continue." As Isaiah and Margaret exchanged vows, something shifted in the atmosphere of the small church. Where there had been tension, now there was a tentative acceptance, perhaps not approval from everyone present, but acknowledgement at least. When Reverend Freeman pronounced them husband and wife, Isaiah kissed his bride with gentle reverence. As they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Washington, Margaret saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine smiles, not just from their friends, but from many of the townspeople as well. Outside the church, as congratulations were offered and hands shaken, Mrs. Henderson approached unexpectedly. She hesitated, then spoke quietly to Margaret. "My husband was cruel to you," she said, referring not to Frank Henderson, but to her late husband. "Cruel to me as well, in different ways. I've envied thin women my whole life, thinking they had everything I didn't." She glanced at Isaiah, who was speaking with Reverend Freeman. "But watching you two today, I think perhaps I've been measuring worth by the wrong standard." Before Margaret could respond, Mrs. Henderson pressed something into her hand, a delicate lace handkerchief. "For good luck," she whispered, then hurried away. As they rode back to Raven Creek, their home now truly theirs together. Margaret reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from Ohio to Kansas, from rejection to acceptance, from shame to pride. "What are you thinking, Mrs. Washington?" Isaiah asked, the new name bringing a smile to both their faces. "That sometimes the most valuable journeys take us places we never expected to go," she replied, "and with people we never expected to love." Isaiah's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, different in color but perfectly matched in strength and purpose. "No one marries a fat girl," Margaret mused, echoing the cruel words that had once defined her, "except a man who sees with his heart instead of just his eyes. And no one accepts a black rancher as an equal," Isaiah added, "except a woman brave enough to defy convention for love." As Raven Creek Ranch appeared on the horizon, their land, their future, Margaret understood that they had created something revolutionary in its simplicity, a marriage based not on what the world thought they should be, but on who they truly were. Two people who had found in each other's differences the perfect reflection of their own worth. What you've just witnessed isn't just a love story, it's a revolution. A declaration that worth isn't determined by inches at the waist or the color of skin, but by the courage to stand tall in a world determined to make you small. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to hear that true worth isn't measured by appearance. Subscribe to The Black Rancher for more untold stories from America's frontier, stories of courage, dignity, and love that history tried to erase, but that deserve to be remembered. Thank you for joining me on this journey back to Willow Creek, Kansas, 1882, where a woman found her voice, a man found his match, and together they changed what an entire town believed was possible. Until next time, remember, those who judge most harshly are often the most afraid. Be brave enough to see with your heart. You might just change someone's world.